Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Cathedral webinar live on June 11, 2025. If it's your first
Jasmine,
time,
we can't hear you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Still can't hear you.
Hello? 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 Can you hear me now?
Preston, are you able to hear Jasmine?
We swap back. Can you guys hear me now?
What about try it now, Jasmine?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, I got you.
Okay. Sorry about that. If it's your first time attending one of our webinars, Cathedra means learning in Creek, and today we'll be learning all about all hazard preparedness in partnerships with Dr. William R. Latchford, who is the president of the Native Peacekeeper Consulting Group. Thank you for being here today, Will. My name is Jasmine Raming. I am the marketing coordinator here at the Native Learning Center, and we're also happy that you could join us today. Please follow along as I read the disclaimer out loud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. Also displayed here is our copyright infringement law. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar presentation materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual properties. Before we get started, I want to familiarize you with the learning platform and where things can be found. I have put a link to today's PDF in this chat. Let me put that on right now. All right. You can also access a copy of the slides as well as accessing today's webinar recording in the future by going to the courses section here on our platform. Any resource items for download are also available within the online course when you go through the courses pages. Each time you're ready to join one of our webinars moving forward, you'll just need to log into the website and click on the large green banner across the top of the screen, like in this picture. When you first join the webinar, it will prompt you to complete an audio test before joining. Please select the listen only option so we can avoid any audio feedback during the webinar. If you are needing to change the speaker your sound is playing from, you can select the phone icon down at the bottom of your screen, and this will bring up a list of your speaker and mic devices so you can choose your preferred audio output option. We do encourage you to participate during today's webinar and will primarily rely on the public chat. In the left-hand gray menu panel, you can open the public chat and share notes. If you see the click on the public chat icon, you'll see an option to open chat between all webinar attendees, the NLC. Sorry about that, a little hiccup. If you click on the shared notes section, you'll find some helpful links, like a link for today's webinar feedback survey, a link to join our weekly newsletter, so you will always know when our webinar and various trainings are happening, a link to the location of our Cathedra webinar archive on our YouTube channel, a link to connect with us on LinkedIn, and a link to bookmark for easier login to Cathedra Constant Learning in the future. Let's all get the chat going now by getting your names, where you're joining us from, your tribal affiliation. If you have one, you may be a tribal employee, and your role within Indian country that may have led you to today's webinar. And one quick final note, while you're introducing yourself in the chat, try to avoid clicking the red menu panel on the left-hand side of your screen. If you click on the red menu panel, it'll take you out of the live webinar. If you do accidentally click this, you can simply rejoin once again by clicking the green banner at the top of the screen. And with that, it's my pleasure to now introduce today's webinar instructor, Will. I'll hand it off to you now.
All right, thank you, Jasmine.
There you go.
All right, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody on this Wednesday afternoon. Hope everybody's having a great day today.
thank you for being on the second webinar of the All Hazard Preparedness and Partnership Series hosted by Native Learning Center. We enjoy the partnership to be able to provide just high-level training for you or information that you can take back to your organizations and just try to enhance your everyday activities with preparing yourself for any emergency or crisis that comes upon your housing authority. As Jasmine said, my name is Will Latchford. I'm a doctor of criminology, specific on leadership. I have over 32 years of law enforcement public safety experience, and I was fortunate enough to 32 years ago to be provided the opportunity from the Seminole Tribe of Florida to come in on a boots level on the ground police officer, and I was able to, through that experience, work my way up through the organization and retired about 2 years ago as the executive director of public safety for the Seminole Tribe, overseeing just under 500 employees and just under $100 million of financial responsibility budgets. So I'm happy to be with you today to just share some knowledge and learn from you as well as we go through this series. I'm very highly focused on leadership. I think leadership, regardless of what profession you're in, really drives success of an organization, and that leader is paramount to professional development and overseeing their staff to basically train them up to provide that high level of service to your tribal community. So through my experience, I'm also the co-director of Florida State University's Native American Crime and Justice Policy Institute. I enjoy teaching. I go around and provide either individual teaching or teaching at universities. I have a bachelor's degree in public administration from Barry University and a master's degree from St. Leo University focused on emergency management and homeland security. On behalf of Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group, we want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group is an organization that was started after I retired. It's owned by Amy Osceola Latchford. It's a family organization, family-run business that is a small business certified Seminole Native woman-owned organization that really focuses on just delivering and enhancing a well-rounded service to anybody that needs support. Our job is not to tell people what to do. Our job is to just enhance what they're doing already and to provide the expertise that over 100 years of consultancy from our consultants around the country, to include Canada, can bring to your organization to just develop and enhance your program better. You're the subject matter experts in your community and well respected. And I admire the housing authorities across Indian country. I had the opportunity not only to work with the Seminole Tribe of Florida housing authorities, but also other housing authorities around the country when I was deployed through Hurricane Katrina and Sandy and other crises that happened throughout Indian country throughout my career. So Native Peacekeeper Consultant Group, through Amy's mission, is to ensure that we arm anybody that comes across our path with information and empower them to just become better today than they were tomorrow, and to become better tomorrow than they were the day before. So we appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. One of the disclaimers we have is, and we shouldn't run into it too much today, but if I say something that's contradictory to your policy, our advice is to go back and listen to your policy. Your success and your program success really depends on you following policy, regardless if that policy is right or wrong. It's about, following policy. And if you identify that contradiction and you go back to see that your policy is wrong, then, it gives you the opportunity to discuss with your leadership to enhance your policies and always change your policies to be at the highest level. If you find that your policy is right and I'm wrong, please feel free to reach out to me to make sure you pass that information to me. And we learn from each other that way, just being candid and having those open discussions. So we appreciate the opportunity, but our whole aspect is to make sure that you're successful and that your organization's successful, and it starts with following the policies that you have in place. All right, so as we talk today, we're going to focus a lot this afternoon over the next 80 to 90 minutes on really the Tribal Housing Authority of Emergency Resource Management. Resources are really the key to our success, regardless of what program you're in, but specifically housing, because so many people depend on the housing authority when a crisis happens. We all know that sometimes they don't depend on us on an average day until they need something, and then when they need something, it becomes a crisis or a priority for them. And our whole job is to make sure that their priority becomes our priority, so we can be successful and we can deliver that high level of service to the community. So we want to explore effective strategies that are managed during critical resources during emergencies. And we want to make sure we focus on those unique contexts and needs of tribal communities. So each community is different. You can't take what you do in one community and just cookie cutter it into another community. As we know, with the uniqueness of every tribe and every community, it's important to develop a policy and a program that's based on the community that you serve. So as we look at the resource management today, this is again a high level course that we're going to be delivering, but it also gives the aspect that you can use some of this information to bring back to your tribe and kind of fit it and make it friendly to your community and to your tribe. So the question I have is just to get you to ponder is, how do we do this with respect to policies, sovereignty, and respecting the community, right? So everything we do is policy oriented. We want to make sure the policies are addressing the sovereignty issues of our specific tribe and our community, but also we want to look at those expectations that the communities have. And when we manage resources, that's part of meeting those goals and meeting those expectations from the community. Expectations are probably the biggest and the most important aspects of any critical event, was what I found out in my career. And so as we look today, yesterday we talked about risk assessments. Resource management is a big part of risk assessments, and it's all relative. So the expectations to the community is important, knowing really what they expect from our program when it comes to emergencies. And if we know what they expect from us, then we can manage our resources elegantly to ensure that we provide that high level of service to the community and we can meet their needs, right? And in order for us to find out what those expectations are, we have to, it's not a one-off. We have to communicate. We have to make sure that we're always constantly in front of what those expectations are in your community that you serve. And through my career, I always kind of tapped into that expectation piece. And I think it's important to share with you this afternoon. And it relates to the resource management pieces. A lot of times when you're in your office, and we're talking to our employees, we think we know what the community needs. And the reality is, if we take a closer look and we sit and we say, what do they expect of us, right? And has anybody ever gone out and asked the community, what do you expect from your tribal housing authority, right? 9 times out of 10, people are going to have a hard time answering that question. They kind of know pieces of what they want, but it gives a good opportunity for you to really understand what those expectations are. It gives you the opportunity to understand where they're at. And through that process, then you can determine how you want to manage your resources. Because if you know what those expectations are in each community and from your residents, then it's a lot easier, and you're not always in crisis when you're dealing with issues. So if you take anything away from today, one of the little nuggets I always like to give is, find those avenues that you can talk to your community and just ask that simple question, right? What do you expect from your tribal housing authority, right? And the reality is, you may get some curt answers. You may get some people who are not necessarily being full transparent with you, and that's okay. It starts a conversation for you really to get deep into what those expectations are, because those expectations are going to help you when it comes to determining what those resource management philosophy and direction should be for your organization. So as we look at the agenda today, we're going to go over 7 core modules. We'll touch base on the foundation of resource management, communication, and the continuity of best practice. There's a couple of polls that we'll go through as we talk this afternoon. If we have time, any questions or specific information. If you have some, I'm pretty good. I know enough about technology to be dangerous, so I'm pretty good to talk. And if I see a question come in the chat, I can bring the answer into my discussion. So if you feel comfortable chatting and putting the question in there, feel free. We want to keep it as relaxed as we can. As we look at resource management, one of the biggest thing I found when we look at resource management is we want to make sure we honor the tribal sovereignty. We want to make sure we honor policy. And a lot of times, as we look at resource management, we have to take in consideration the cultural sensitivity of each community, right? And I know throughout my career, I learned this process, and I had to be open to learning it to ensure that I could deliver that high level of expectations to the community I serve. So through our practice of learning the environment, learning each reservation with its own personality, learning each community that has different nuances, and they had different levels of expectations when it came to how our resources were deployed, what those resources were, right? So sometimes they don't even know what your resources that you have. They don't know what resources they need. They don't know what resources you have. So it's important to get into those discussions with the community because they need to always be a partner with you. They need to be a partner with you, and that's going to build that resiliency and that strength. One, to help you when that crisis is going along, but also on your everyday basis, like today when you don't have a crisis, and hopefully none of you have a crisis today, that that support is there for you, and they understand that the hard work that you do every day and the effort that you and your employees put into providing that service to the community, they appreciate it more. So I found through my career, when you look at your policies and you just recognize the fact that each community is different, they have cultural sensitivities, there's different aspects of the community that have expectations that you need to incorporate within your policies, and you need to respect them. So that's something that's important and will help you as you progress through ensuring that you have the best policies in place to deal with any emergency. We want to try to understand some of the learning objectives, understand resource management fundamentals. We want to define resource management within your context of tribal housing. We want to develop resource inventories and just get ourselves in a mind frame that a resource inventory is very important when it comes to emergencies. So it's just something we have at our fingertips. We know what resources we have. We know those inventories are always kept up to date, and it's a fluid document. It's not just a document that we create and say, okay, we got it, let's put it on the shelf and leave it on the shelf until we need it. No, it's a document and it's a resource that's going to articulate the inventory that we have, and every day or every week we're going to be looking at that inventory and adjusting it as we need to. We want to look at implementing allocation strategies, learn effective approaches for resource allocation when it comes to mutual aid agreements and different partnerships that we have from a housing standpoint. We're going to talk a little bit about safeguarding assets when it comes to your personnel. It's very important. One of the things that we get so focused on, that expectation piece within the community, sometimes our employees get lost in that overview. And so we want to talk a little bit today about protecting the asset and the resource of employees, right? You have physical infrastructures when it comes to the buildings that you're in or the vehicles that you drive, but just as important is the people that work for you, right? How they feel, what they're going through, how they're managing the emergency itself, and what behavior signs that you can see and you can look at that can help you adjust their schedule and support them as you go through this. And then you have the community that has an emotional response to every crisis and event that comes upon them. So we want to talk a little bit about safeguarding some of those assets and resources, because your community is also a resource, right? You can't do this alone. You can't do this in silos. It's important that you utilize your community as a partner, because it's going to make your job easier when you do that. So module 1 focuses on the foundation of resource management, right? Resource management, basically in a simple context, refers to the systematic approach that identifies, acquires, allocates, and tracks resources needed to maintain your operation when it comes to tribal housing, right? So tribal housing focus specific is addressing the needs of your clients, addressing the needs of your tenants, addressing the needs that your buildings and your infrastructure requires, right? From not only just the target harden of the buildings that they live in, the houses or the apartment buildings, but also your infrastructure when it comes to your cyber world, right? So everything you do, and like we're doing here on the computer, is in this thing that we call the cloud and the servers, and we want to make sure that we look at that from a resource standpoint, because when that breaks down, we need to be able to have redundancy. We need to be able to identify where those weaknesses are, so we can ensure that the service doesn't get dropped, or the service level that we provide to the community doesn't get minimized. We want to look at some of the legal frameworks that we have. There's a lot of laws that are out there. There's a lot of transitions going on right now with the transition of the federal government that's going to impact you, and I'm sure some of you have already been impacted. So we'll take just a overview look at that when we look at resource management. And then risk management, right? Risk management are individuals that we need to have right at our side, because those are ones that are going to help us prepare for housing specific insurance issues, employee issues. If employees get hurt on the job, we want risk management there to make sure that the tribe is protected and the sovereignty in your program is protected. So when we look at some of the key stakeholders that we have, tribal housing, you're the key component, right? And a lot of times what I see is programs sometimes acquiesce their authority to emergency management. And what I would tell you, being a public safety and emergency management official, is don't do that, right? Don't give your power away to emergency management. Emergency management uses a resource to you. You're the subject matter expert of your tenants. You're the subject matter experts of your policies. You're the subject matter experts of what is needed in your community or in your area that you oversee. Do not give your authority away to emergency management officials. And I understand some of your tribes are set up to where you turn everything over to your emergency manager and they kind of take things. I'm a big component is that one organization or one program cannot do it by themselves. So if there's anything that you can open your mind to today is don't give your supervisory authority or your program authority away to any other program when it comes to crisis. If it's a housing issue, you're the subject matter experts, and everybody needs to come around you and they need to support you and guide you and help you get through whatever that crisis is. When we look at some of the other stakeholders that are there, again, Bureau of Indian Affairs has an emergency management component. IHS has a component that is definitely a resource that I used. I know over my career being the emergency manager of the tribe, of the Seminole Tribe, they have a program called Trans Am that they were able to provide us resources at no charge that are located around the country that assisted out. So you have federal resources that are definitely there to help you out as you navigate forward with the recent developments of FEMA, to include some of the information that came out today about how FEMA is looking to, the administration is looking to downsize FEMA, possibly even eliminate FEMA. Well, time will tell on that, but as we all know, and the information's out there, we have to start looking at that, right? So from a housing standpoint, I know from my previous career, we relied on FEMA. Although the Seminole Tribe, we have very strong redundancy policies in place from lessons that we learned over the years, and every event that we go through, we still use FEMA in some aspect or another. We had that relationship. We invited them in, and they were partnered with us. They didn't come in and take over. They didn't tell the tribe what to do. The tribe was always in the driver's seat. And so as they navigate through this process now with the administration change and as things are progressing, every organization has to look at, if FEMA is no longer there, how do you operate, right? How do you manage your housing authority? How do you deal with reimbursement processes? If your insurance isn't covering the rental communities, you know, is there opportunities for you to partner with the state for nonprofits that you can pick up that slack or pick up those areas where if FEMA's not there anymore? We don't know what that future is going to be, but it's something that I'll talk about today, or I wanted to talk about today, just to put on your radar, because I think it's important. I think the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Office of Native American Programs, is a resource for you, and I think they'll continue to be a resource for you. I think they're separate from FEMA, so I think the federal government is going to be around. It's just a matter of how you navigate the history of how you utilize the federal government when it came to emergencies, when it comes to the tribal housing authorities and what is impacted through those crises. So how do we navigate this change is very important. The other part is the tribal emergency management and other programs within the tribe, right? Tribal offices that are connected to your tribe, you have to partner with. Those are key stakeholders that are the subject matter experts in that area. However, just like you're the subject matter expert in housing, they should not give their authority over to you. If they're the point program, you should come around them and support them. So it's all relative. And one of the big things that I see in a lot of communities, either in Indian country or even outside Indian country, is programs working in silos. And we have to break that. Silos do not do the community any justice. It hurts the community, and we want to make sure that we break those silos. And what I would stress to you today is tribal housing, you're in a great position to take over your for the sake of discussion, take over your emergency management process if there are silos, because you are a leader in the community. People depend on you. They will always depend on you, especially when you have clients and tenants, and you have the opportunity to bring all those other tribal programs together. So don't sell yourself short. I think tribal housing is a key aspect to every crisis that happens in the community. And sometimes what I've seen over my career is housing's kind of set aside, and the reality is that they can be at the head of the table and they can contribute. So don't sell yourself short when it comes to the framework. You're an important part to the success of your community. Some of the risks that I just want to look at, and just have you think about as we progress is, we all deal with different issues, right? Hurricane season's going on in the southeast area. You have wildfires that are going to be impacted during the summertime. You have winter, of course, you have snowstorms and blizzards that are there. These are definitely issues that create vulnerabilities within a community. It creates a weakness within your communities and your residents. And what it does is it takes each circumstance to another level, right? So just visualize which resource that you have for each one of these, right? So if you deal with wildfires, really think about what those resources are, right? Sometimes we tend to kind of push off to, well, a wildfire, the wildland firefighters are going to deal with that. But the reality is that they're going to be the front of it. And that's where we come around and we support them, regardless if for the police or for housing or even health, because there's an air quality issue. So there may be a point person in front, but we have to make sure that when it comes to specific emergency risks, we have to look at and have a pulse on what's going on so we can deploy those resources to ensure that our housing community is taken care of. And I bring this up and I talk a little bit about risk in this specific presentation because I think it's about a mindset, right? You have to have the mindset. It's a way of life that no one is alone in this. So regardless of what if it's a water system issue or if it's a wildfire issue, yes, you have programs that are going to deal at the front end of that. However, we all have to take responsibility in that and know what our role is, because that's going to help either deploy our resources that can deal directly with issues we're dealing with, or we can take our resources to help those other programs that are dealing with those issues. So when it comes to a mindset, what I would stress to you is develop that mindset that, regardless of what the issue is, take ownership of the issue, be supportive of the program. That's the point of that issue. However, it's still your responsibility as a housing program to ensure your residents are safe, and you don't want to be caught offhand where a wildfire or a specific event impacts your housing community, and you could have dealt with it a lot earlier from a resource management issue. So I know and I recognize, you're being asked to do more with less from a housing standpoint, and you're being asked to do more with less at a higher level. And so that creates a little bit of stress. It creates a little bit of burden on you. But if you can get in front of it and you can develop that mindset and forecast and think, not just for today and tomorrow, think about 6 months, think about, a year with these events that occur, some of these events that occur from, the weather events, the wildfire events, these things happen to us every year. And what I find through training is that, everyone has the book. We take the book off the shelf during the time that they're around, and then we put it back on the shelf, and then it collects dust until we have to take it back off, right? My advice to you and through this training is make it a mindset, keep it off the shelf, keep it on your desk, always visit it, have those conversations, and make your program better every day as you progress forward. So I want to share my screen with you for a second. And so if I can ask you to, if you have your phone, this little QR code here, if you can take your phone and take your photo, your camera out and do the QR code, and then it's going to ask you to either put your name. This is all voluntarily, as far as if you want to add your name, you don't have to. And then I would like you to ask the question: what is your most difficult resource to access during an emergency, right? So what's the most difficult resource that you find yourself dealing with that occurs to you during an emergency? So we'll take a minute. If you can take your phone out. If you have a phone, go ahead and scan it, answer the question, and just kind of walks you through. Don't worry, when you put your answer in, it won't show. When I show the responses, it won't have your name, so no one will be called out or embarrassed over your answer. Just keep your answers clean if you don't mind, please. All right, nobody's answered yet. All right, so when we look at some of these, as you can see, some of these that are on the screen, these are the answers that were given in. Personnel, that's a great one. When you look at the resources that you have, the personnel is really the paramount to your success. The basic alert systems, those are something that they cost money, right? They create an opportunity for us to put good information out, but we have to budget for that. We have to manage that. We have to ensure that the information that's going out is correct. So it adds to the system, but we have to make sure we're positioned correctly. Transportation, that's a great one when it comes to resources. On an average day, we deal with transportation issues, but when a crisis happens, things ramp up. There's opportunities that we may be able to do different things if we had more transportation issues or vehicles. We can move people around better if we had more transportation or assets to deal with. Emergency shelters, that's another one, right? That's a resource that can help us or hurt us depending on how it's set up and what's going on at the shelter, and do we have manpower for that. So we'll talk a little bit about manpower here as we progress forward. Let me see here. Being on an island, that's a great one. And, I would contribute that to the silo piece. You feel like you're on an island. There's no support, and that impacts your resources. That impacts how you do things, because really being on the island is really kind of what you get, right? The housing people are the only ones that are really doing the work, while everybody else is somewhere else, and through my career, the Seminole Tribe is separated across multiple locations throughout Florida. And, through that opportunity, we found by moving assets around, it assisted people from not being on an island. We had the opportunity to do it. We had mutual aids in place. We had different agreements in place, but we found that even moving housing employees across reservations from different reservations that they may work on every day allowed for a more streamlined process during emergencies. And that was important, but just as important was the personnel and the communication piece, right? So you always want to make an opportunity to communicate effectively. And sometimes our communication isn't at that level that we think it's at. And sometimes it's a good opportunity, like I talked about before, about the expectations, is going out to the community and talking to the community and asking them, how things are what their expectations are of your community or of your program. One of the things that you can do is you can start conversations as far as how your communication is, right? How your messaging is when it comes to putting the message out there when it comes to your service that you're providing to the community. So all great answers that were up there. But I like to use this as an opportunity to show that we all have different challenges when it comes to resources. And through those challenges, we can learn from each other, right? We can talk to each other. We can learn from each other, because on my end, our communication may be great, right? But when we look at another tribe, their communication may not be at that level, right? The Seminole Tribe used Code Red as an opportunity to send information out, right? There's easy texting that you can send information out for cell phones, right? Those are things that we can learn from each other, and sometimes we don't have to reinvent the wheel if we talk to each other and understand that we may not do it the same way, but we can use those resources and we can implement things around from tribe to tribe or program to program. And a lot of times, even internally as an executive, I would talk to other executives to find out what they were using, right? It may not have been public safety related, but I can make it public safety related if it's something that is going to benefit us. So like TCD, the Tribal Community Development, where housing was positioned, they used a program that they could create commercials, they could create videos to put out to the community. Well, I had the opportunity to meet with the executive director of Tribal Community Development and talk to him about that program, and then able to implement that and from a public safety standpoint and make it a public safety attribute through that process. So I was able to learn and not be in that silo. So it's important to understand what specific resource challenges you have. And I know that poll only, you can put one or two that are there, but there's nothing wrong with sitting down, and I encourage you to sit down and write down your challenges, right? Write down your challenges and ask your employees to write down what their challenges are, because a lot of times you're going to find your thought process is very similar to your employees, but you're going to find your employees have a lot of good information that you can use to develop and enhance your program. So although we may be very different, we all are very similar, and we have a lot of resources that we can learn from to help through that process of resource management. Module 2 identifies and prioritizes the resources. So when we look at identifying and prioritizing resources, we look at several different things: personnel, equipment, funding, transportation, the vendors that we have, right? We look at how do we take, when we look at these resources, and how do we look at categorizing them so it's easily read, it's easily at our fingertips, it's something that we can manage and it's not going to be overwhelming, not just to us, but to the people below us, right? So sometimes as a leader in the ivory tower, you create these systems or these busy systems that you understand, but the front line necessarily doesn't get it. And they may not be at that level that you're at. So sometimes you have to take that system and bring it down to a level to where everybody understands, and it can be comprehensive, but it's an inventory that is across all categories so everybody understands, right? You want to organize by the type, by the function, by the accessibility of the category of that resource that you have. And then you want to prioritize those resources, and you want to rank them on how critical they are from a life safety standpoint all the way down to an operations standpoint. So you want to be effective when you do your resource management, but you want to also make sure that you have what you need, and what you need matters, right? You just don't want to have it to have it. You want to have what you need, but you want to make sure what you need matters. And that's important to the people that you serve. So this process must account for unique needs for each individual community. It must be specific to meet your challenges, but it's also an open flowing document. So you want to make sure you identify and prioritize those resources when it comes to your resources. And for example, is when Hurricane Irma was coming through South Florida, we had an issue where there was a propane shortage for the tribe. And we actually relied on FEMA to locate propane for us. What we found was all these propane companies, when there's a state of emergency and the federal government is engaged, all the propane companies fall underneath the federal government. So they're no longer an individual business. They actually fall under the federal government. So we tapped into FEMA to find propane for us because our normal everyday vendors that we had couldn't respond, right? So we didn't know that at the time. We had them as vendors. They brought propane out every month to the reservations or when they were called upon. But when the switch was flipped and the community needed propane during the crisis and during the hurricane, we found that they weren't available as quick as they were on an everyday. And the reason for that is because during a state of emergency, they were wrapped up within all the policies and the practice of the federal government. So it gave us an opportunity to partner with FEMA. FEMA then assisted us in finding propane, right? They didn't take over. They didn't come in and take over the Seminole Tribe or our process. We were still in the lead, but we gave them that task and they ended up finding propane for us. So that identified us to, when we looked at prioritizing our resources, is to not just the internal resources, but the vendors, right? The vendors that we use every day, sometimes we don't think about when a crisis happens, they may not be available to us. So we have to ask those questions to them prior to the crisis happening. And if we would have done that in the beginning, we may have been positioned a little bit better than when we were during the crisis. It added a little bit more stress to us. It allowed us to work with FEMA, but we may not have had to do that if we would have asked those right answers or those right questions and got those answers before the crisis happened. So one of the things you want to look at when you identify your resources, it's not only the internal resources like your personnel, your equipment, the funding or transportation. You want to include your vendors in that. Your everyday vendors, you want to make sure that you have and you understand what those resources are. So when that crisis happens, those vendors, you'll know exactly what those vendors can provide to you. This is an inventory template. It's a very simple one that we utilized in certain areas. You know, as you see, the categories, the building material, fuel and energy, sanitation, and medical aid. Again, one of these documents, when you look at these templates, you want to make sure that everybody can understand the template, right? You don't want to make a crazy template where it becomes part of the problem or the conflict for your staff, right? So when you make this a template, you want to have a resource inventory. Keep it simple. A Word or an Excel document will do the trick. You don't have to put all the bells and whistles on it. You want to make sure that You use your technology to support your operation. Don't allow the technology to run your operation, right? You still always have to be in control when you make this template, but use the technology to support your operation. So a comprehensive inventory should be maintained digitally. You should also keep a printed copy in a book, in a folder that's readily accessible, and provide that to your staff, right? Because if the computers go down, like we talked about yesterday, when cell phone goes down, we don't necessarily have right off the top of our brains the phone numbers for everybody, right? Same thing when it comes to your inventory. If your computers go down, you want to make sure you have a hard copy. You want to make sure this document's updated quarterly, so you want to make a tickler file so every quarter that it's updated. You want to make sure your staff has access to not only the current document, but if you update it, you want to make sure there's a process in place, an accountability mechanism that you can put in place that they will be able to identify with. If you don't have a policy program, that's something. There's different policy programs out there that will help you with not just your regular policies, but inventory templates. You can update your template inside this policy software. There's many of them out there. If you would like me to send you a couple, feel free to email me at the end. I'll have my email. You can email me, and you can use them for an accountability piece, because it's important. You don't want somebody in the middle of a crisis to say, well, I don't know where the new inventory template is. I don't know what resources that I have, right? I didn't get that copy. I didn't get the most up-to-date copy. So you want to make sure that you streamline the process. You want to give the opportunity for the employees to get the information, sign off on the information, and you confirm that they have the staff, they have the information, and they know what's on that sheet, right? So when you look at what personnel that you're looking for, where they're at, you want to look at any of your building material, where's it stored at? Where is it going to be located? Where can you send somebody to go get it if you need it, right? So it's kind of a template that everybody can work off of, and it keeps everybody on the same page. When we look at resource and prioritizing the framework, of course, life safety is going to be the paramount. You always want to make sure the safety of your tenants are always at the top of the tier, and your resources are going to prevent the immediate loss of life, right? So when you look at that, you want to be at the hip of the public safety people. You want to work in conjunction with every program that you can to make sure your life safety is at the top, right? So you want to make sure that every human need is met, right? It's not the human want, it's the human needs, right? Especially during crisis. Sometimes, the community, because of that emotional piece, they don't do it on purpose, but their perception is what they want should be delivered to them. And it's our job as emergency managers or housing directors or public safety officials is to get the community to a level of understanding that they may get what they want, but it may not be immediate. You're going to give them what they need so the crisis can get through. And then once the crisis is passed and you get back to normalcy, if you deliver what they want, that's something you can do. But during the crisis, not everybody's going to get what they want, and you need to be able to manage that from your level from a housing authority. You want to make sure your infrastructure is protected when it comes to the resource prioritization. That's important, because if your infrastructures are not good, you're going to have to deal with all the people that are there. If your housing office is not good, where are people going to come, right? So you want to make sure all these issues, from the shelters to the regular buildings that the people are living in to your office building, you want to make sure that's protected as well. And then you look at the resources for the community continuity, right? So you want to make sure the resources are maintained from a social function. You want to make sure that it's a safe function for them, and it helps tribal housing authorities allow you to make decisions during the emergency, right? So if you have all this in place beforehand, it's going to allow you to protect your community. It's going to allow you to address any needs beforehand. And the good part about it is you can work with your community to where when the crisis happens, nobody is adding to the crisis. You deal with the crisis, everybody's emotions are at the same level, and no one is getting out of hand to where it's adding more stress to the stress the crisis is already bringing, right? One of the case studies that I just throw on the webinar today is about resource preparedness, right? So if you have in this particular scenario, a winter storm, which was forecasted, a blizzard conditions expected with potential power outages lasting 3 to 5 days. Priority one, we want to look at backup power, right? We want to secure generators, and we have tiers, right? We have tiers where we secure generators for the elderly or maybe the medical, and also the community center where people may be housed, right? Priority two would be heating resources. We want to distribute emergency heaters and carbon monoxide detectors, work with the fire department if we have those officials in our community, so where can we get those at? Where can we stage them out to be part of the priorities when we do this staging, right? And we may have to look at, some people may not get these, right? So when we look at prioritizing our resources, we want to look at who needs them the most, not wants them the most, who needs them the most, right? And then we look at to ensure snow removal in this particular scenario. Is the equipment relative? Is it active? Does it need to be serviced? We want to get all that done prior to the storm coming. So this is where the resource management comes, where you can kind of map this out to help you prepare for different events and different scenarios that come into your community, right? Part of the other thing is gap analysis, right? We look at what do we have and what do we need, right? Sometimes what we have is not what we need. And sometimes it's because of budget shortfalls or just different things in our environment we're not able to get, right? We needed police cars at a certain time during hurricane season, and the gap was the new police cars that we ordered weren't going to get in time. They weren't going to come and be delivered in time. And once they're delivered, it takes another 2 months just to get all the equipment in them, get them striped, and then get them deployed and exchange them out with the older cars that need to be decommissioned. Well, we found through our process that we had a big gap, because if a hurricane was to hit us, we wouldn't have enough cars to deliver or to provide that service and deliver that service to the community. So what we had to do, we had to take our gap analysis when we looked at our inventory and determine, okay, are we going to allow the staff to keep take-home cars? Should we leave? Should we take the take-home cars away, leave the cars at the office in case individuals needed them, right? So we had to make those tough decisions because we knew a crisis was upon us. And this is where we can identify through our resource shortfalls. We can take that inventory analysis and we can determine what our needs are, where our shortcomings are, and then make those necessary adjustments. And during this time, you're not going to make people happy, right? To tell a police officer that we're taking their take-home car away, that's their livelihood, that's their office, right? They take that and they treat that vehicle as if it's their own. And so now we're going to tell them, listen, we're taking your own car away, even though they don't own it. It's issued to them, right? So technically they own it because they're a representation, they're an arm of the tribe, they're the ambassador of the tribe, and we're going to remove that car and leave it at the station so somebody else can drive it and not damage it. But that also plays in, right? Some people take care of things a little bit better than others. And so when you tell somebody we're going to remove your car and keep it at the office, that's not going to make some people happy. So those are those things as a leader you have to manage. And through this gap analysis, those are what's going to put you in a position where you're going to talk to your employees, and you have to balance that out because you're going to deliver that bad news and those employees aren't going to be happy. But you still have to depend on those employees to step up and do the job and do it without emotion and get the job done for the people that really matter, and that's the community. So you can take gap analysis. You want to identify those shortfalls, and then that will allow you to make those difficult decisions when it comes to protecting your community and making sure that they're prepared and they have the necessary assets to get through whatever that crisis is. Allocations of strategies and mutual aid. You want to make sure you develop partnerships and develop agreements beforehand. Don't wait for the crisis to occur to start that discussion of what people can do for you, right? Forecast yourself from a housing leader, a housing authority leader. Who do you need to partner with? What needs to be in place? What agreements do we have to have in place? What those expectations are that you're looking for, and what can they deliver to you, right? What are those other programs? What can they deliver to you to make sure that you can effectively run your housing authority, right? Mutual aid agreements provide a formal structure for sharing resources between tribal housing authorities and other entities during an emergency, right? Talk to your other cohorts when it comes to those other programs to determine what they have that can help you, and then create a mutual aid between two programs or multiple programs to be able to provide when you need to flip that switch. You know that other program is going to be there because you have a mutual aid in place, just like you're going to be there if they need you, right? So it's not just one-sided. It's a mutual aid that is going to work both ways. You want to make sure that those agreements are in place prior to any event occurring. And those are vital. They're vital to your success, and they're vital to make sure you have enough resources to do your job effectively. Some of the mutual aid partners in tribal housing that you can look for and that I would recommend, of course, tribal emergency management, the utility departments is definitely something from a housing standpoint you want to make sure you have that relationship with. Indian Health Services or your tribal clinics are important. Whoever runs your shelters, I know the Seminole Tribe, the shelters fall under the health department, so you want to look at different aspects. Recreation department, when you look at recreation, what can recreation do for housing? Well, they can come over and keep the kids busy. The recreation employees can come over and deal with the kids in the community or your housing authority to where they can come over and they can develop games for the kids. They can sit with the kids and go over different aspects that will keep the kids busy. Youth centers, that's another. Boys and Girls Club is another aspect that you can partner with. You want to think of these things from a resource management aspect. These resources, when it comes to recreation, education, Boys and Girls Club, on an average day, they may not be helping you out, but the reality is on an average day, they can help you out. In an emergency, they can definitely help you out. And if you create these partnerships beforehand, it's something you can benefit from. You want to look at, and I know this is a sensitive area, sometimes your neighbors are not tribal communities, right? But sometimes you can partner with the outside communities that have resources that may not negatively impact your community, but you can use their resources to help you out, right? So take a look at and evaluate what those resources are outside your reservations that may be able to be just brought in during the crisis, during the emergency, that can help your housing authority. Housing authorities off the reservations are doing things that may be unique to that community, but you can tap into that uniqueness to help it in your tribal community. They may have businesses or nonprofits or different organizations that they use that you may not have thought of. So you want to create that relationship with your partners that are outside the reservation when it comes to housing authorities. I know it's something that we did from a police department standpoint. We went and talked to other housing authorities from other agencies that have housing authorities. We talked to those agencies and said, okay, what are you doing in your tribe, in your housing authority, and how are you handling that community policing aspect? What are you doing to help your housing authority, right? So we talked to them to see what they were doing. The good part about doing that is, one, you can confirm you're doing things right because you may be in the industry standard, and that's going to confirm that you're doing the same thing other housing authorities are doing. The other part is you can look at what they're doing that you may not be doing that can be kind of massaged to work in the tribal community, right? Again, I'm not a big believer. You can't take one thing and just force it into another community, but you can take the idea, massage the idea, and make it work for the community that your jurisdiction's over. So partner with those outside entities. And of course, then you have the federal government that you can partner with. I know HUD is there for you. BIA is there. They have resources that they can come in. State emergency management, I know that's a whole nother issue that Sometimes that's a sensitive area, but emergency management across the state has resources that you may be able to partner in to support your housing authority. So it's just something that you can look at. The other part is again, we talked about FEMA. I wanted to just touch on this. I think it's important that you as housing directors know who your FEMA liaison is. I know that's pushed aside in some tribes where you allow your emergency managers to deal with FEMA, but they have people that deal directly with housing issues. And that's a question you want to ask your emergency manager. See if you can locate that person, at least while FEMA's around. Again, we don't know how long they're going to be around, but they do have good people that work in FEMA that understand what you go through, and it's a good resource that they can provide from a policy standpoint, and different resources that they can provide to you and get prepared before that crisis hits. So when we look at the ICS roles of tribal housing, a lot of times we look at the Emergency Operations Center as kind of the decision maker. And I believe in the Emergency Operations Center process. But I also believe that from a tribal housing standpoint, you should have your mini, what I would call a mini EOC, right? So you're gonna deal with the Emergency Operations Center that's overall for your tribe. But for your program itself, you should have something set up that is a quasi incident command inside housing, right? You don't have to use the titles of incident commander, operations section, planning section, or logistics section. You can use your everyday titles that you use, but this is basically a mini EOC within the housing structure. And it's something that you want to set up, and it'll help streamline some of those decisions that you have to make when it comes to resource management, right? So you have the EOC where all these programs in the tribe, they go and sit in this room and they make decisions with your political officials and they manage the operation, right? There's nothing wrong from housing having that same setup within your organization at the housing office. And that's what I would stress to you. Have that EOC set up within the housing office so you could talk amongst your employees or your coworkers in housing, and you can strategize, you can plan, you can forecast, you can order equipment or identify equipment that you need to be able to deploy at your level, right? And then you pass that information on to the main emergency operations center. But this is something that I found is not necessarily an aspect within tribal housing, but I think it could be beneficial if you create your own EOC within your housing program that complements the bigger EOC of the tribe, and it'll help you manage your crisis where it's not just one person managing it. It's you're managing it as a team. You're going to be better with a force multiplier where it's not putting all the stress on one person. You can sit and have your mini EOC within housing that can help you identify issues, identify resources that need to be deployed. You can move resources around, and everybody that's in that housing EOC has the finger on the pulse, right? They know what's going on, and you can provide that service to the community at the highest level, right? Sometimes when you have an emergency operations center, things get too big. They get too big, and the community gets lost in that process because there's such a long way between the EOC and the community. This tribal housing authority EOC concept is something that you can utilize, kind of keeps your finger on the pulse in your community that you're serving. And then it also keeps the finger on the pulse and you can provide that opportunity to the overall EOC. So it's just something to consider. I'm a big believer in it. I think that sometimes we get too focused on the top driven, and I believe in top driven leadership. But I also believe in middle management. I believe in programs have to keep that autonomy and they have to keep that subject matter expert piece at the fingertips to help the community. So something you may want to consider. One of the scenarios that we'll just talk about really quick is generators. Here's an exercise where there was 8 generators that were available. There was 15 housing units that needed generators. And then there was 4 elders that needed generators for medical needs. What do you do, right? So you sit around the room, you can throw scenarios out this. How would you deploy and allocate your generators, right? You want to consider establishing the community center where you have the 2 generators. You want to prioritize the 4 units for the elders. That's a medical necessity, right? And then rotating the generators around based on the vulnerability assessment, based on the weather, and really what the needs are, right? We ran into the aspect of where the hurricane was going to hit 4 different locations across the state of Florida. 4 out of the 8 locations the Seminole Tribe had, and we took all the generators and we moved them north out of the way of the path of the storm, right? We took them away from the individual communities that weren't going to be impacted, and we took them away so when the communities that were impacted, we could deploy them in those communities, and we prioritized who was going to get those generators. It's unrealistic to think that everybody's going to have the opportunity to have a generator, so those are where tough decisions are going to have to be made. Some people are going to be happy because they think they deserve a generator, and maybe they do, but you just don't have those resources to deploy. And so you have to make those decisions. And the key to this and to minimize the stress level is to plan, and figure out what's going to happen with those, in this particular case, those generators beforehand, and then communicate it out. I'm a big believer, if people know the rules or they know the plan, then it's a little bit more, they may not like the plan, but the reality is it's a little bit more of an acceptance, and they can try to understand it, gives them the opportunity to know what's going to happen instead of finding out when the crisis is happening that they're not going to get a generator. If they know they're not going to get a generator, and the reason why they're not going to get a generator, they're a little bit, they may be mad, but they're going to accept it a little bit better than in the middle of a crisis where it's going to cause more issues for you. It's going to cause more issues for the employee, and nobody wins because the community person is going to be upset, and it's going to cause more frustration. And then that's where different things get involved. Political pressure happens, different aspects happens where people make not good decisions. And then next thing you know, there's no consistency, and then you send the wrong message out when it comes to the resources. So you want to make sure you deploy the resources that are sound. You want to make sure you communicate that piece out to the community and let them know in advance how you're deploying your resources out, so everybody understands what the rules of the field are. When we look at resource request and deployment flow chart, this is a way you can use this slide as an example. You want to create a system that works for you, right? This system worked for us. We'd identify the needs. We'd have an internal resource that would be checked. We would talk to people when it comes to the inventory. We would consult to confirm to make sure that those resources are still available. We would tell the programs, listen, put the request in so we can evaluate your request, right? So there was a formal process. So not one person could sit and say, yeah, I'm in charge of the generators, I'm going to give them who I want it to go to, right? We put a formal request in place, and then we had a team look at that request to see if it made sense, to see if we could even do it, to see if we had the resource. And then, of course, you deploy the resource, and you'd make sure that it was documented and it was put in the right place, and it was evaluated, right? Sometimes you're going to deploy resources and they're there for a day or two, and then you can take them back and you can redeploy them to other locations. So that's something you want to make sure that you have a system in place that's going to work for your environment, and it's something that works for everybody, and it's fair. Because it's unrealistic to think you're going to have resources for everybody, but you have to prioritize those resources you have. And if you take a team approach and everybody has input on your team, then you're always going to make the best decision. It may not always be the right decision, but you're going to make the best decision for the community overall. We want to look at cost considerations when it comes to the resources that we have, from an emergency procurement to reimbursement requirements. We streamlined our process where we ran into the issue where, the reimbursement is great, but it's reimbursement. So the tribe has to fund the process beforehand. So what we did, we identified the budget or a potential budget. And when we budgeted every year, we had a hurricane budget, right? And that was really the emergency crisis budget. It was titled under a hurricane budget. And what we did was that was where, when we needed something for a hurricane before a hurricane season, that's what we tapped into. So it didn't affect the overall program budgets. We identified that early on to make sure that the tribe's programs weren't impacted from a budgetary standpoint. If we needed equipment, we bought it out of that line item, and then it was streamlined because everything from that aspect was used for hurricane purposes. And that's all driven from a tribal emergency declaration standpoint, right? When we had that tribal declaration standpoint, that's where we ended up pulling those funds from. And that was kind of the trigger in the process we had in place. So once that tribal emergency declaration was signed off and the tribal council gave that directive with the chairman, then we ended up purchasing and allocating our resources, the things that we needed, things that we needed to add to, and we allocated that through that budget process to where our budget year, we always had an emergency fund when it comes to either hurricanes or crises that happen within the community. Because, you know, when you live in Florida, and this is just for an example, and I know it's different throughout the country, but you can use the template of this, is that Florida deals a lot with hurricanes, right? But through that aspect, we also deal with terrorist issues. We deal with different everyday crises that happen. Water pipes break. Roads are shut down, floodings happen just from rainstorms, you know, so there's difference than just hurricanes. Well, that line item we were able to pull from because every crisis that happened in the tribe, we evaluated if there was a tribal emergency declaration that was needed. And if it was needed, that was the trigger point to where we could pull from that line item when that declaration was signed off. So it's something you want to make an evaluation of. Reimbursement is definitely important. As again, I would just stress to you, as moving forward with some of the transition of the administration change and how it's going to look in the future, it's something you want to consider. If there is no reimbursement in the future, how does your tribal housing platform look, right? So is your insurance covering everything? So now's the time to meet with your insurance carrier for your tribal housing. I believe a lot of tribes use Emron as an insurance carrier. There's other insurance companies that are out there, but now's the time to reach out to your insurance and ask them the question, you know, if FEMA doesn't have the reimbursement process, do we have the maximum coverage for our community? So your insurance company kind of picks up the slack and makes sure everything's covered. So the reimbursement process for FEMA wasn't triggered until the insurance piece wasn't covered anyway. So the process is already there, but you want to work with your insurance company because they're a resource for you, right? They may have resources that they can send into your community as your insurance carrier. So this is the time to start doing that with the transition. Again, not being political, but these are things that you have to look at from the standpoint of transition through the administrative change and some of the things that are going on at a higher level. So you want to make sure that you take this in consideration. Cost consideration is something you always want to continue to look at. You want to make sure that you have it documented and you continue to document from overtime to gas expenditures to just different purchases. You want to make sure everything is detailed and streamlined in that process. Again, we just talked about the cost effectiveness when it comes to the matrix. This is a matrix that you can use. It's very simplistic. Again, it's something that you can create because you want to have one plan, then you want to have a backup plan, right? And there's nothing wrong with having another plan after the backup plan because things change, right? The first plan may not work. You have to resort to your redundancy and implement your second plan or your second tier, right? My advice is have a 3-tier process in place when it comes to a cost analysis because you're going to be impacted and the first plan that you have in place may not work, right? It's all subjective. We as humans, we're not perfect. We create plans that are subject to change and they may not always work. So you want to make sure that whatever plan that you create for your resource allocation, that you look at the cost analysis of it and have a tier in place, a one tier, 2 tier, and 3 tier plan in place to help you through that process. You all deal with different challenges as you go through. You want to look and make sure you identify those challenges because they're going to impact those resources. I mentioned about the propane issue that we had through Hurricane Irma. You know, when we were going through Hurricane Katrina, we knew Katrina was going to hit South Florida and it was going to skirt South Florida. But then we were requested through BIA to respond to help Choctaw. And we knew that we needed equipment. So through the process of identifying what equipment we needed, we responded with over 80 personnel to Choctaw. And when we responded there, we knew that we were going to need certain equipment and resources to be deployed because we knew that getting into Choctaw was going to be difficult after Katrina, as massive as that storm was. So we ended up going through our supply chain. We got a lot of chainsaws, fuel, and we allocated all that knowing that before we even reached Choctaw, we were going to have an issue getting through the roads. So you want to look at different challenges that you have. That's a challenge on response, right? Just getting there, we were going to navigate a lot of resources, a lot of adversity by cutting down trees that were blocking the road, right? And making sure our chainsaws worked. Chainsaw broke, what do we do? How many chainsaws do we have? Do we have enough fuel to continue to get the chainsaws to continue to run? Are our vehicles able to run through some of these areas that were impacted along the road that we're going to have flat tires? If we have a flat tire, how do we change it, right? Each car has a spare tire. If a fire truck has a flat tire, what do we do? These are those things that you want to play through those scenarios. And sometimes you're going to play through it at the last minute. When we responded to Katrina, we ended up doing that at the last minute because we didn't know we were going there. So that was a crisis itself, was planning that crisis out using the framework that we had to ensure that when we get to Choctaw, we can get there safe, we can get there with all the equipment that we need, and then we can support that tribe. So you want to look at and identify those accesses to the challenges that you have and create redundancy and create those issues that are going to help you respond to your community or other communities. Went too far here. So when we look at again, cost planning, here's a scenario: a Southwestern tribe, tribal housing authority faced a major water system failure during summer heat. Without emergency funds allocated, they couldn't immediately purchase replacement parts, right? That happens, right? What are the consequences for that poor planning? Residents were without water for 5 days. The housing authority had to purchase bottled water at premier pricing and pay for emergency shipment of the parts for the damaged replacement parts, ultimately costing 3 times what a proactive purchasing would have had, right? So if you would have thought about, okay, what if something happens, where's the replacement parts? Let's have something on hand. So the lesson learned was the housing authority now maintains an emergency procurement fund. They have pre-approved vendor agreements in place for critical supplies, and it conducts regularly infrastructure assessments to anticipate potential failures, right? That's having the things in place and the required documents in place and working with your vendors so you're not paying more than what you have to, and your vendors are going to be there to support you when you need those supplies. So this case study is just a simple case study, but it's a case study that you can use and you can multiply it on different areas and different levels within your tribe and within your housing authorities. Module 5 is safeguarding housing. You know, it's something that you want to make sure that you safeguard all your housing assets. You want to do everything you can, right? So we talked about just recently in that last slide, we talked about having vendors in place to support you, right? Water vendors, debris vendors, roofers, propane, general contractors, right? You want to have all these different areas that are going to be meaningful to you to keep your tribal housing safe. You want to have agreements in place. So when you have to flip that switch, that you're safeguarding your assets within your community. You want to have your technology people in place, right? If you have your own technology people within the tribe, meet with them and ask them, who is their support? If the tribe system goes down, who is their support? Cell phone carriers. Bring your cell phone carriers in and have them tell you what their plan is. A lot of times cell phone companies have what they call mules. They can put a mule right in the middle of your housing authority where cell phones are going to be utilized, and there'll be access for your residents, right? But you need to do that in advance. You need to make sure you safeguard all these issues and these assets for your infrastructure. Do it in advance. So meet with all these people in advance, get the contracts in place, have those conversations, and ask those difficult questions to support your housing authority. Your community is paramount, and your residents are depending on you to have all this in place, right? So do it before the crisis hits. When you look at, again, the critical housing infrastructure, you want to talk to your housing people, your air conditioned people, ask them the questions. Where are their supplies at? How many supplies do they have on hand when it comes to the air conditions? How long will it take if the air conditions go down? How long is it going to take in the crisis to get you those air conditioned parts, or even the air condition itself, right? The HVAC systems, right? Talk to your electricians. Talk to your water sanitary people. Talk to your fuel storage people. Vehicles, your vehicle maintenance. This is important when it comes to the critical infrastructure. How many vehicles do you have? How many vehicles will you need? Are they up to service? Go talk to your dealership, wherever you get your car serviced. Ask them the questions. When a crisis hits, how long will it take for them to get parts in if a vehicle goes down, right? Create an MOU with them so that way if one of your vehicle goes down, you can bring that car in and they have to get it out within 24 hours, 36 hours. That is where they're going to tap into those resources, and they'll oblige with you because they want your business. They want that business that's guaranteed business. If they can sign a contract with you that if a crisis happens, you're going to bring your issues to them. That's money in their pocket and their business, and it gets those resources back on the road for you. Again, we talked about the emergency communications. That's something that we really took to heart when cell phones go down. We brought all the cell phone companies in, found out how long it would take them to deliver a mule to us in the rural areas. How long will it take to get those mules to us so we can get at least cell phone coverage up so people can call their families, they can talk to each other, or even call for an emergency standpoint. So you want to make sure that you have that in place. This is a risk assessment checklist when it comes to resources. This is something you can utilize, something I just put together for the presentation, but you can build off of it, right? You want to conduct comprehensive risk assessments of the resources that you have. You want to make sure you get photos of each resource. So you have that for the purposes of insurance backing. You can see, for reimbursements. We had issues where when we responded to a location, we had generators stolen. We had pictures of the generators. We had all the asset numbers on the generators, the serial numbers. So we had each resource had a file when it came down to a picture, serial numbers. So if something happens, we had all that information. We had all that backup that we can be reimbursed. We can file police reports, and we can determine, the age, the usage. Is it something wear and tear that we need new equipment? You want to look at planning out your resources and have a separate folder for each resource that you have. Protective action, again, look at your physical protections, the cyber protections. Documentation is very important. We went over the documentation piece. Documentation is key to anything that you do. And I will tell you, if you can streamline and find software that you can manage your process, not run your process, but manage your process, that's what you want to do. And that'll help you with protective actions when it comes to documentation. There's a process out there that is a company out there that it's called Secure Passage. Very good process. They have a system in place that will come in, and you can look at threat assessments with them. All their documents are FEMA approved or federal government approved and insurance approved, and it's actually a documentation for resources. So that's something that you can utilize. Again, it's called Secure Passage. It's an organization that has helped with schools, with resources, and it's a company that can really elevate your housing authority when it comes to asset documentation. If you want more information on that program, please email me after this webinar. I want to talk a little bit about, in the next 5 or 6 minutes, about recognizing behavioral. The biggest asset you have and resource you have is the human asset, right? So you want to make sure that you keep an eye on your employees. You know, it's a stressful time when crises happen. And the resource that you have, and the most important resource, is the human resource. And your employees are important to you, and you want to keep an eye on how they're being. You want to keep an eye on their behavior. You know, they need to make sure they take care of themselves, right? Well-being is important to them. It's important to their family. So you want to make sure that you do everything you can from a leadership standpoint to deal with any emotional distress and being able to identify the emotional indicators that may be a negative, right? Because you don't want an employee going in the community and being stressed out dealing with your customers. You want your employees to be at the top of their game. So you, as a leader in housing authority, you want to make sure that you recognize those behaviors, right? You want to see when someone's on edge, right? You can tell by their voice. You can tell by some of the statements they're making. You want to make sure that you have every component in place where you can de-escalate a situation when it comes to your employees, right? The other part is you want to make sure you have physical boundaries. You want to make sure no one violates any physical boundaries when it comes to any of those issues, right? So when something happens, you have a stressor, that emotions are high, and that's very important that you identify that as a leader, that nothing gets out of hand. So you want to identify those physical barriers to protect not only you as the leader, but also your employees, and protect each other. During this time, you want to be cultural sensitive to your community. It's important to realize that even though there's a crisis, you still have to recognize and respect the traditional cultural aspects of your community. You know, we had a wildfire in Big Cypress, that there was a cultural fire burning. It couldn't burn out, but we had a wildfire that was going in that direction. So our job was to put the wildfire out and also maintain the cultural aspect to continue the ceremonial fire going. So you have a contradiction. We had a contradiction there with the two fires. So what we did was we met with the medicine man, we met with the family, we talked about things that we can do to keep the traditional fire going, but also we wanted to put out the wildfire. So we had the aspect of broaching this sensitive topic to ensure that we respected the cultural values of the community, their traditional values, and what do we need to do to put the wildfire out, but also honor the traditional aspect of it. We were able to create fire lines around the traditional fire, but we also had to tell the family and the medicine man, if push came to shove and we needed to put the fire out for the sake of the safety of the community, we would let them know beforehand. But we had to make sure that everybody was safe. So we wanted to respect that. And through that whole process, we used resources to circle the traditional fire. We created fire lines, and we put some fire trucks right at the traditional fire to fight any of the wildfire that was broaching the traditional fire. So you still need to respect those areas when it comes to the traditional values. Part of this too is you want to look at when a crisis happens, your community is going to be on edge, right? It creates trauma in people when it comes to the environment. You know, when people feel threatened in a manner to where they may get hurt or their family members get hurt, it creates that trauma-infused thought. So you want to make sure from a housing standpoint, you have de-escalation response and training to your employees, right? This is just a an example of some scripts. You have a resident refusing to evacuate during a fire. One of the de-escalations could be, I understand this is your home. It's difficult to leave. Our primary concern is your safety. Can we discuss what you need to feel that's going to make you comfortable so you can relieve or you can evacuate temporarily, right? That's a little bit easier than going in there saying, you need to leave now, get out. I need you to leave now. So you want to make sure your employees from the housing standpoint have that de-escalation training and their verbiage isn't adding to the stress of the community. You know, it's difficult. It's not normal for people to deal with crisis. So you want to make sure your employees are trained up so they can deal with the de-escalation phase. Again, trauma-informed approaches are important. You want to partner with your behavioral health systems that are within your programs. They can conduct training for you to teach your people how to talk in a manner of crisis, right? So you don't say those trigger words and create more trauma for your residents. So lean on your your behavioral health people that the counselors can do training for you. So go to them and ask them to do training that can provide those trauma-informed attributes to your employees, so your employees are armed with a better way to deal with the community. Again, module 7 is communication. You know, we touched based on that. It's important that you have a communication plan that for the sake of continuity and planning, you want to make sure that your resources are put in place and your communication plan aligns with your resource plan. Again, emergency communication, one of the resources are radios. You want to have redundancy. Our housing department had a radio. They can't be on public safety channels, so we asked IT to have a redundancy, put another emergency radio system in place. So we had 2 radio systems. If a radio system goes down, they were able to use the second radio system from a housing standpoint. We ran into this when we responded somewhere. We had a housing truck. For whatever reason, they made the wrong turn, and we couldn't get a hold of them on the radio because the radios were down, and we were in a position where we don't even know where they went. So we had to send a whole team out for them, looking for them, because they decided to do their own thing and go in their own direction. So if we had a secondary radio system or a communication process in place, we would have been better off. So that triggered us to put a secondary radio system in place. Again, it's about continuity of operation. You want to make sure the essential functions are taken care of. When you look at your succession planning, you know, you want to make sure you define what those succession plans are, and you want to make sure it's not just a one-off. It's not just seasonal. It's an everyday mindset, everyday behavior. You want to make sure you get into your employees' mind and your program. So as we look at some of the takeaways, you want to implement some of the processes we put in place today. You want to build those relationships with your partners within your community. Plans are important, so you want to make sure your resource management plans are up to date, they're put in place, and they're always fluid. And then practice those resource allocations, practice the resource deployments on scenarios, right? It doesn't have to be live. You can do scenario-based training and allow your people to understand what their roles are when it comes to deploying resources. I'm at 93 minutes, Jasmine. If anybody, I don't see any questions in the chat. If you have questions, my email is right here, williamlatchford@npkcg.com. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or any issues or feedback that you want to talk about. I'm always available to you. I admire you from a tribal housing standpoint. You're important, and your roles in tribal housing is something that is going to make your community safer. So I admire you and stepping up to take care of the community, because I recognize your job is not easy, and you deal with a lot of expectations that are across a lot of spectrums. So if I can do anything for you, please feel free to email me or even call me or text me. I want you to know that I support your mission, and your mission is important for each one of your tribes. So thank you for being on today. We have 2 more webinars tomorrow and Friday. And if you can join us, please join us. If not, I know Native Learning Center has a great process that can help you reach these videos if you can't join tomorrow. So please, everybody, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Jasmine, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Will. We appreciate your time and effort with this presentation today, and we hope you guys can take all this wonderful information back to your tribal communities or TDHEs. As I close out this webinar, please feel free to submit any questions or comments you have for Will through the chat, or if you feel more comfortable emailing him, feel free to do that as well. All right, please take a moment to complete our survey about today's webinar that I have linked for you in the chat. It only takes a minute or so, and your feedback really helps us to do more of what is working well and to improve on areas that we need to. We invite you to be as candid as you like. This survey is anonymous. We hope you can join us for the next webinar. It'll be All Hazard Preparedness and Partnership Day 3, again with Will. It'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see all your lovely names back in the chat tomorrow too. That'd be great. And feel free to access this and any other recordings at our new CADITA webinar archive, now posted on our YouTube channel. Feel free to view them and share them with your colleagues and friends. So this is where you can go to get the recordings if you feel like it, or you can also go to the courses tab through your account and view the recordings there, as well as gain access to the slides. And please also check out our upcoming events posted on various social medias. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an in-house produced podcast titled The Hope of Being a Native American Podcast, where we discuss more featured topics within Native American housing and self-determination. You can listen on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, as well as view our video recordings with our guests on YouTube. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again, Will. See you tomorrow.